Next slide. Okay. Yesterday I have talked about the strength, weakness and limitation of the indicator as general. Now we will compare it. Not compare. We will see the advantage and disadvantage of every indicator. First, advantage of GDP. As an indicator, it is an useful figure for comparing countries, often used to rank countries, establish a system of aid payment. It is good indicator, state of economy, provision of service, fairly easy to calculate from official government figures. So basically GDP ni memang senang dan diguna pakai, sangat luas. Okay. Disadvantage dia lah, dia tak tunjukkan inequalities, dia boleh hide inequalities sebab dia tak tunjukkan distribution of wealth tu. Lepas tu pula, can be manipulated by government who want to appear poor to collect more aid. So itu pun disadvantage juga. Does not take into account subsistence or informal economies which are very important in less developed country. So yang ni lah advantage dengan disadvantage untuk GDP ataupun GNP. So setiap benda ada strength, ada disadvantage dia. Okay, next slide. Advantage of infant mortality. Advantage dia indicate quality of health. Very easy to easy indicator to understand. Focus significant aspect of development, iaitu human development itself. Disadvantage dia lah hard to get accurate figure of as many birth in the less developed country would be unregistered. Macam kita tahu, contohnya macam tak payah cakap, ingatlah kita kata kat Malaysia je. In Malaysia, there is a few place that we don't even know that there is a child born there in a rural place. Sometimes they are not registered. That's why there are a government that comes to the rural place in order to collect and make IC for them. That is one example lah. Evidence from some countries that the level of infant mortality is well above than disclosed. As usual, political issue. So nak buatkan orang nampak elok, orang tipu-tipu sikit, sebelah. Macam tak betul sangat tapi tak adalah nak kata orang tipu terus. Lepas tu, high infant mortality could be a result of social political factor. For example, in China, the figure would be very high because of the country's one-child policy. Diorang tak ada mortality macam mana cakap. Kat sana, kalau ada lebih daripada anak, diorang kena bahasa jahat dispose lah. So, disebabkan benda tu, child mortality rate dia tinggi. Infant mortality rate. Okay. Next one is birth rate pula. Birth rate ni pula clear indicator of country level of development. As there are more people, more babies being born, that means that will be more employment ni. Dia ada banyak lagi orang yang ada banyak labor work lagi, labor force. So can be used to predicting future situation and planning accordingly. Sama juga macam tadi. So disadvantage dia pula can be affected by population policies. Sama juga macam China. So disebabkan China one child policy, so diorang punya diorang punya figure diorang dah nampak dah lah. Lepas tu pula figures in less developed country not necessarily accurate. Biasalah ekonomi. Banyak yang tak semua boleh dapat secara perfect lah. So not necessarily accurate. Ini untuk infant mortality dengan birth. Next is literacy rate. Literacy rate ni more on education. So indicates the amount of education on offer. So if the literacy rate is high, that means the education is good. There is many education that is offer. Then show how many children could and couldn't attend school. So if the literacy rate is high, that means more children entering school, attend school. But if it's low, then the opposite of it. This disadvantage is takes no notice other skill people may have. For example, good understanding technique of farming. So sometimes that the literacy rate more towards the education, the theories that we learn, but the physical one not really being used lah, not really being considered. Macam tu lah. Okay, when used on its own, doesn't tell us whether the figure is the consequence of too few school or the fact that children are having to work. Daripada ayat ni pun kita dah faham, maksudnya literacy rate tu memang dia tunjuk pasal literacy, tapi dia tak tunjuk pasal kalau dia rendah adakah sebab school kurang ataupun because the child being a labor force, a forced labor worker. The next one is death rate. Advantage dia indicates level of health care provision, water quality, sanitation and living condition. Dia pun easy indicator juga sebab death kan, kalau death ada kubur orang ada record. Macam itulah. The disadvantage of death rate pula does not actually tell us what is responsible for the high death rate. Dia just bagi tahu ada death tapi tak bagi tahu sebab apa. Okay, the next one is very difficult to get accurate figures. Macam biasalah, semua yang kita kena dapatkan sendiri daripada people, benda yang lebih kepada quality ni memang susah nak dapatkan. Sebab itulah multi-dimensional nature ni adalah susah sikit untuk kita determine the economic development. Sebab tu ada single indicator, ada opposite indicator. Next one. Dah habis dah. Itu je untuk strength, weakness, advantage and limitation.
Kalau kita tengokkan punya kan indeks yang death rate tu, sekarang masa pandemik death rate dia sangat melambung tinggi lah, kan?
Masa pandemik lah, sekarang dah endemik kan, so mungkin dah berkurang sikit lah. Tapi in future lagi lah, untuk 2020 memang naik lah. 2021 sebab tak habis lagi, so tunggu je.
Yeah. Okay, so overall, do you have any questions on the chapter?
Chapter tak habis je, ada satu ni.
Ada satu lagi slide.
Ada satu lagi.
Satu part lagi.
Satu part lagi untuk chapter
Okay, okay. So let's continue.
Okay, so next is the possible relationship between economic growth and economic development. This is just a recap because we have learned before that economic development, the meaning is improvement in living standards or economic well-being or welfare, and it involves multi-dimensional concepts such as reduction in poverty, income poverty, and all inequality. And economic growth, we only consider the quantitative figure, which is an increase in real GDP over time. And it is one-dimensional concept because we only measure how well the economic activity is being doing. So as mentioned before, although economic growth is a precondition to achieve economic development, this is not always necessary. Okay. So the relationship, we can see that there is a positive relationship between a country economic growth and its economic development. Okay, for example, the wealthier a country is, the higher the standard of living. Okay, so we can refer to this table we can see that the GNI, meaning the wealth of the country, is high here, and we can see also the HDI value is also high, near 1. So this is the relationship that the wealthier a country is, the higher the standard of living, meaning the higher the economic growth, the higher the economic development. Okay. However, it is also possible for some people to live happier without higher income. This is because economic growth can bring negative consequences, negative externality of production, such as pollution, climate change, and environmental problems. Okay. So far, you have any questions? Okay, no. Right. So next, next, the relationship. Economic growth does not always lead to higher standard of living for majority of people. Okay, just now we say that economic growth, the higher economic growth, the higher the economic development. But this is not always the case, where economic growth does not always lead to higher standard of living for majority of people. This is because economic growth can be caused by productivity gains due to increased use of technology and automation, such as self-service checkouts in McDonald's. But this results in technological unemployment, which is structural unemployment, because if we substitute people, the workforce, with machines, so the workers doesn't have any jobs anymore, so they will become unemployed. And another example of it is if a country GDP has increased due to spending significantly more on national defense, then growth may not occur, but not development, because the money is not used for the sake of the people, meaning the country GDP, the wealth of the country is spent more on the national defense, where only minority of people can be benefit from it, but not the rest of the people. Okay. And then economic growth, this is another relationship. Economic growth can also lead to greater income inequality in the economy. For example, we know that Hong Kong has high economic growth, but Hong Kong also is one of the world's largest wealth gap. Okay, any questions so far? Okay. So next, we can also use PPC curve to illustrate the relationship between economic growth and economic development. Okay, over here we can see there is a defense good and staple food. Okay, just I mentioned before, defense food and staple food, and PPC curve we can show the opportunity cost for both, meaning the quantity of defense food produced and also the quantity of staple food produced. Okay, so if the economy is moving from point P to Q, there is no economic growth, but there is some economic development, because there is no economic growth because there is no increase in output. But there is economic development, because as we can see here, the quantity of staple food produced increased, but the opportunity cost is that the defense good decrease. So the country is producing more staple food for the benefit of the people, more than the minority of the people. Right? So next, moving the economy from P to R shows no economic development, but some economic growth. This is because we can see that the output increase because the PPC curve shift from PPC curve 1 to PPC curve 2, but the country is producing more defense good rather than staple food. So the allocation of the country is being used to generate defense good, but not to distribute food to the people. Right. So moving from point P to S shows both economic growth and economic development, because there is increase in output and also increase in quantity produced for staple food here, and dia macam balance lah kat sini. Okay. Ada soalan tak?
Cima nak tanya boleh?
Okay.
Yang P to Q tu kan no economic growth but some development, meaning dari P to Q kan defense good decrease, So kalau defense good, decrease meaning development ke?
Defense food decrease. Okay, kejap. Nanti I explain dekat next slide. Kejap Point P to Q macam ni. Okay. Okay, explain slide dulu nanti I terangkan balik. Okay. Point P to Q, we assume that there is no changes to resources available, the state of technology or level of productivity, the economic, meaning if there is no change in resources available or state in technology or level of productivity, the PPC curve will not shift, right? As we learned in the microeconomic chapter. So there is no economic growth, but there is economic development, as we can see here, because quantity of staple food increases and more people can enjoy more units of staple food. So the opportunity cost is less defense food will be produced on. And then yang Chris tanya tadi, kita boleh tengok economic development ni in the short run, because countries ni they reallocate more resources to provide goods and services that reach a greater number of people in the economy, including the poorest members of society. Meaning, okay, ni number one. And number two, we cut expenditure on production of goods and services that benefit only minority of citizens. So there is no economic growth because there is no change in resources available or state of technology or level of productivity, because PPC curve does not shift to the right. But there is economic development because the country is reallocate more resources to provide goods and services that reach a greater number of people in the economy, including the poorest members of society. Meaning they reallocate resources more to give the people, all the people in the country, rather than producing defense good. Because defense good ni dia macam benefit only to the macam tentera and the fame of the country, not to the people. Okay, do you understand? Faham tak? Kenapa dia tak ada economic growth tapi dia ada economic development?
Nak tanya boleh? Jima,
Okay.
jelas sikit Jima.
Okay.
Jima nak tanya boleh?
Okay, boleh?
Kalau what happen kalau Q tu pergi ke P, then what do we call it?
Q pergi P maksudnya economic development dia dah kurang. Sebab dia reallocate resources tu untuk benefit only minority of citizen. Faham tak? Maksudnya dia akan kurangkan dia akan reallocate less to the people. Okay.
Alright, thank you.
Laju sangat cakap. Oh, sorry. Okay. Setakat ni faham tak? Okay.
Kenapa dia short run ni?
Ini pun tak shoot. Okay, short run ni sebab kita boleh reallocate resources in the short run untuk produce staple food. Tapi at the same time, kita tak boleh nak selalu kurangkan defense group ni, sebab yang ni pun necessity juga, sebab kita tahu in the future apa yang mungkin kita punya country will be attacked. So kita still kena produce defense group ni. So kita tak boleh nak sentiasa kurangkan defense item ni untuk reallocate staple food saja. So dia kena short, dia akan jadi in short run kalau tak ada economic growth. Faham tak? Sebab nanti resources tu akan berkurangan as time goes by. Faham tak? Okay. Next. Yang ni pun sama juga. Bila there is upward shift of PPC curve from PPC 1 to PPC 2, there is innovation, technological improvement, or rise in productivity. It indicates that the country is able to produce more staple foods and defense goods. Meaning if we increase the PPC curve here, we can see that the quantity that can be produced increase also. Right. Okay. And then kena tahu lah kenapa dia economic growth, because ada technological improvement or rise in productivity or innovation. Okay. Next. Moving on to point Q to point R. Q to R sini. Okay. Meaning the country achieve economic growth because the point on the PPC curve dia pergi physical yang lagi improve kat sini. Tapi the economy reallocates production in favor to defense good by moving from point Q to point R. Okay, meaning walaupun ada economic growth, baguslah kan. Tapi the economy tu reallocates production more to defense good rather than the produce staple food. Okay, so there is no improvement in terms of allocating essential goods, staple foods to the people. And then in this case, growth is achieved without any contribution to economic development. Meaning kita ada growth sebab ada physical movement, tapi tak ada economic development because there is no increase in staple food production. But there is increase in defense food. Okay, do you have any questions so far? Tak ada eh? Okay, yang ni pula macam tadi, this is an ideal situation because economic growth comes along with economic development. So meaning when we have economic growth here, kita ada economic development also because we can see that the quantity also increase, but the country also reallocates more resources to produce staple food. And then dia punya quantity produced for both item, defense goods and staple food, dia macam balance. Okay, so maksudnya Q kan kat sini. Tapi S pula dekat sini. So kita nampak yang staple food production increase also. And punya defense good pun from P kat sini and S dekat sini pun bertambah. So sebab tu ada economic growth and also economic development. Sebab quantity of staple food essential good ni bertambah. So that more people can get foods including the poorest, and the economy also benefit from producing more defense goods. Okay. So in any case, the economic growth is usually needed for long term for there to be economic development. Because after all, to meet their infinite wants, desires, people need to earn more income. Meaning memanglah ada economic development sebab kita ada staple food production kan. Tapi income people pun kena increase juga sebab to have economic development, we not only have to reduce the poverty rate but also increase the happy index, macam kita happy. So kita ada more money, kita boleh beli banyak benda. So kita akan jadi lebih happy and then it will contribute to economic development. Okay. So far faham ke?
Faham.
Okay. Kalau nak ulang pun cakap lah. Okay. Okay. Yang ni pula contoh soalan je lah. Contoh soalan, explain the relationship between economic growth and economic development. Kita tengok dekat markah 3 ke 4. Dia cakap dekat sini. Kena define dulu economic growth and economic development macam biasa sebab kita kena define apa economic term dekat sini. And then second one, kalau dekat sini dia cakap economic growth, kita boleh cakap relationship tu whether economic growth tu is usually necessary for economic development since it provides increased resources just as I said before. And then you can also say that economic development is possible without economic growth if resources are redistributed. Macam PPC curve tadi, macam kita tengok PPC curve tadi, economic growth pun can be achieved. Economic development can be achieved without economic growth in the short run sebab kalau kita reallocate resources. Yang ni. Okay. And then economic growth may increase per capita incomes which may be used to increase the standard of living of individuals. Macam yang cakap tadi, people pun kena earn more income to increase the standard of living. Untuk beli rumah lagi besar, untuk tampung banyak anak lagi, untuk beli apa yang dia nak, dia punya desire. And then you can also draw a PPC curve where economic growth occurring but not development. Macam yang case tadi. Case yang ni. Salah. Mana? Case yang ni. Ada economic growth sebab ada PPC curve shift, tapi tak ada economic development sebab tak ada staple food increase. Production of staple food dia makin kurang. Macam itulah cara kalau dia tanya explain the relationship between economic growth and economic development. Okay, ada question tak so far?
No.
Okay, clear so far? Okay, itu je. Lepas tu kalau nak tengok lagi nanti tengok lagi. Cuma yang ni dia include sekali dengan topik makroekonomi sebab ada SID.
Teacher bacakan soalan yang keluar this year pasal yang ni. Dia tak ada 100% soalan November. Soalan dia will be, soalan A dia adalah explain how a better trained and educated labour force might affect economic growth. Okay, better trained educated labour force relate to might affect economic growth. So both side sebab how the education works with a lot of example. That 10 marks. For the 15 marks, soalan dia lah, discuss the view that economic growth always lead to rising living standard. So dia actually soalan yang similar dengan our discussion. Cuma instead of saying economic development, dia punya dia tukar sikit, dia punya words dia jadi rising living standards. So it's actually economic growth and economic development lah sebenarnya. Right, so that will be this year punya, last month punya soalan exam, November. So this is what yang you guys do discussing lah. Right. Any comments? Other comments? Yang lain semua okay ke?
None at the moment, teacher.
Okay. Shall we
Okay,
continue?
teacher.
Okay.
Nak confirm balik,
Hmm.
ada ke term economic development true fall?
Yes, it might be if, for example, the focus of a country is focusing on military items, on weapons, not so much on the consumer items and so on. So it may not lead to economic developments or rising standard of living. Or you might say that they are keep on producing at the expense of environmental problems, issues, pollutions. So it not lead to living standards ataupun economic development. Boleh ya?
Teacher, ada specific term ke kalau development fall?
Development for lower living standards. Selalunya kita boleh turn into living standards. More coughing in Afghanistan, another one will be in term of apa yang kita nak cakap tadi? Another ones you can link to inequality, income distributions. So we might say that we have higher economic growth, like our GDP increases for maybe 5% whatsoever. But if a country having a wider gap, income distribution or income inequality is so big, it means that majority of the people is from the poor and very limited from the rich. So it means that the higher growth will basically goes to the rich, not so much to the poor. So then with the poor having a limited increase in resources, they will not be able to have a better materials matters lah, or living standards. So itu kita boleh rinse. So to justify that one, kita boleh bagi Gini coefficient lah. Okay, any other people nak comment ke? Okay, kalau tak ada, thank you very much. Kita continue lah. Kita masih ada 20 minit ni kan, at least kita boleh cover sikit.
Okay, so kita masuk bab barriers to development. So first kita start dengan ni poverty trap, aka poverty cycle. So kalau kita perasan, not all lah of course, but for a lot of poor families like in poor countries, macam sini pun in Malaysia pun possible ada aja. Poverty dalam family tu dia start dari dulu lagi and dia akan kena pass down for to the future generations. So this kejadian ni is also one of the reasons for poverty. So itulah dia cakap sana. One of the reasons for poverty is the existence of poverty itself. So apa tu poverty trap? Definition dalam buku teks is any linked combination of barriers to growth. Yang barriers of growth tu nanti kita akan tengok secara lebih mendalam. Growth and development that forms a circle, thus self-perpetuating unless the circle can be broken. So sebab itu dia dipanggil poverty cycle juga, sebab dia macam cycle. Dia berulang dan berulang unless ada some sort of thing to interfere supaya kita boleh supaya orang tu boleh escape lah poverty trap tu. Okay, so boleh next. So itu dia cakap sana, it's a vicious cycle of poverty and deprivation, and it causes even greater poverty from one generation to the next. So why does this thing happen? Why can people get trapped in poverty? Basically because low income earners will most likely spend most, if not all, of their income to meet essential needs. So for example, they spend a lot on food because they don't earn a lot to begin with. So whatever they have to spend on food, on water, on safe living conditions. So because of that, this will mean that they don't have a lot of funds to invest in their future, in trying to get out of their keadaan tu. So that's why they're trapped in poverty. Dia bukanlah yang dorang memang suka dalam poverty or apa, but sometimes they just don't have the opportunity to keluar lah dari trap tu. So these traps may be illustrated by the use of a poverty cycle. So nama pun cycle, dia akan macam dalam bulatan lah. Dia mesti continuous. So sometimes this is also referred to as developmental traps. So okay, kan? So how to draw, basically dia macam ni. Ini satu contoh. So actually you can start anywhere, tapi nanti saya explain ni, I'll start with no basic education. So untuk draw the poverty cycle, basically dia bukan semestinya exactly like this. Dia macam depending on the barrier to development that you want to focus on. For example, ini no basic education, but maybe the situation that you get, dia macam ikut low income. So untuk draw poverty cycle tu, you have to come up with basically like a flow chart to show that when someone is poor, when poverty occurs because of low income, dia akan dia macam cause a cascade of reaction lah kalau kata bio, that will eventually lead back to low income. So basically main point dia macam dia memang kena circle back to your point, the first point. So and then kita juga mesti pandai explain lah the cycle. Macam kan cycle dia just cakap low income jadi low savings, but macam mana, how does that correlate? Kenapa dia jadi macam tu begitu? So untuk this poverty cycle, mari kita tengok macam mana dia berlaku gitu. So okay. So ini buruk sikit lah the cycle now because I wanted to fit it in the side. So first kita start with no basic education, so because this explanation dia akan start sana lah. So First, this is like kalau what will happen if people in that country, the poorest members of that country, dia tak dapat basic education. So lack of basic education will prevent them from getting into the mainstream formal workforce. So ini pun formal workforce, I think akan dimention juga nanti, but basically dia macam structured labor which is structured and paid for in formal ways. So dia macam proper job lah, macam kita kerja di office or macam tu lah, yang macam ada structured way to get wages macam tu. And this is inilah yang contribute to GDP. So as I said, no basic education akan lead to the people dorang tidak dapat masuk formal workforce. So kenapa dia macam tu? Because of the lack of basic education, they don't have the skills or requisite knowledge to get a job. So like if kalau dorang, sebab yalah kita tengoklah orang yang post for hire notices, dorang ada dorang punya syarat-syarat sendiri, mungkin dorang minta degree or pandai guna komputer, etc. So if these people don't get education, macam mana dorang mau dapat those skills? Sebab kalau belajar sendiri pun, where would they get the money? So that's why they cannot masuk formal workforce ni. So because of that, this will lead to the problem of low income sebab they cannot get a job. And kalau dorang ada kerja pun, it might not be very high paying sebab dia bukan dalam formal workforce ni. So because of low income ni, they will struggle to earn, because of like they don't have a job, they will struggle to earn sufficient income to meet day-to-day expenses. So macam mengulang lah, dorang akan dapat low income. So okay. So from low income kita tengok dia akan jadi low savings. So when there is low income or low GDP per capita, so itu slash, there will also be low savings ratio. So apa tu low savings ratio? Is basically the amount of savings expressed as proportion of total disposable income. So dia macam just people aren't saving as much lah. Sebab yalah, they don't have any money to spare. So apa dorang memasuk dalam bank kan? So after that, because of low income, dia akan jadi low savings or low savings ratio. So kita pergi the next step, low savings. So kalau jadinya low savings ratio, macam dalam bank, country punya bank tu sikit je lah ratio, savings dalam dia. So because of that, the country has limited funds for investment. So simple je point tu. So because of the low savings, akan jadinya country tu tidak banyak duit for investment. So the next point, low investment. Due to limited funds, the country, they cannot invest much on infrastructure macam to support healthcare and education. So macam dia country tu sebab there's not a lot of savings in the bank, so macam bank pun tidak banyak duit lah probably. So the country cannot, dia tidak boleh bagi banyak duit lah to invest in macam hospitals or schools, or mungkin schools or hospital tu ada, but like the technology, mungkin like technology dalam dia pun not very good. So sebab they don't have enough funds to improve. So because of the low investment, akan jadinya low productivity. So because of the low investment, the quality of the low investment in healthcare, education, semua tu, the quality of human capital is also low. So kenapa dia macam tu? Sebab healthcare macam dia tidak kena invest kan. So like the population punya health dia rendah. So macam like contohlah kalau sakit, then dia tidak boleh lah like work productively, so dia sakit-sakit. And then for education tu macam yang kita sebut tadi lah, yang because they don't have education, they can't they like kalau orang dapat the job pun they don't have a lot of skills, so macam they can't do it productively. Macam mungkin ada cara yang lagi efficient for them to do the work, but because they don't have enough education, like the workers macam they don't know how to do that efficient way lah. So that's why quality of human capital in that country akan jadi low. So sebab quality capital too low, the firms will also have low productivity. So kalau low productivity, and if the productive capacity of the firms rendah, this will reduce national output. Sebab kan productivity tu kalau tinggi dia macam more efficient lah the firm. So kalau low productivity, and then kan dia cakap hinders productive capacity. So macam they cannot they cannot produce as much, and they cannot produce as efficiently. So national output pun makin rendah. So kalau national output makin rendah, apa yang akan jadi? Kita akan tengok lepas ni. So kita pergi yang next. So as you can see dalam the cycle, dia jump back to no basic education. So macam mana dia akan jadi macam tu? So because of the low productivity, that will cause reduced national output, the national income of the country, dia akan makin rendah. So because like it got lower, like dia memang sudah low tapi dia makin low, country sebab tengoklah before this memang dia tidak dapat invest. So when the productivity is low, which caused the national income to become even lower, of course makin lah dia tidak dapat invest in the things that I said just now that they cannot invest, macam education. So because of that, because they can't afford to invest in basic education for all citizens, sebab itulah dia macam they're back to no basic education. So the country cannot afford to like to ensure that all the citizens will have basic education. And so jadinya ulang balik. So as you can see, that's why the cycle dia macam dia kasih tengok lah like the basic steps, but you have to be able to also explain lah like in between those steps apa yang jadi. Macam kalau no basic education, between no basic education and income, ada macam pasal jobs, employment. So that's for drawing and explaining poverty cycle. Okay. Okay kan, kalau gitu ada lagi sikit.
Kiranya poverty cycle ni bukan for family lah, it's for country.
Dia macam begitulah. Dia pasal kita illustrate how poverty in the country, dia macam kenapa country tu susah untuk keluar dari untuk remove lah poverty dia. Sebab I mean gitulah. Dia involve families juga lah, but they are not involve one family only. Dia macam kita kena fikir all the families. Macam tu. Ada lagi? Kalau tidak, okay. So, dia possible je untuk break the poverty cycle. So, this is like an example lah for like one child who is born into poverty. So, we can see in the start, it says child born into poverty. So, let's say mungkin family dia dapat subsidi, or macam maybe ada like some NGO yang akan tolonglah the family financially. So because of pertolongan ni, the child will get balanced nutrition, macam dia dapatlah makan makanan yang berkhasiat semua tu. So this will lead to good physical and mental development. Sebab sihat badan otak cerdas. Okay, so because of the and also satu lagi because of the mental development and also sebab family dia kena tolong tu, so the child can gain education. So dia akan dapatlah knowledge and skills tu. So kalau dia dapat knowledge and skills, senanglah dia untuk cari employment. So itulah dia cakap sana employment. So because the child gets a job, dia kena employed sudah. Now the child can provide financial and economic sustainability for family dia. Not only like the child's parents, but also anak-anak dia nanti. So this is the beginning of a better future. Tapi ini susah, something like this macam susah sikit lah untuk dicapai if it's by themselves. Sebab macam as we can see, because as we saw in the poverty cycle system ni, that because you can from the poverty cycle just now, kita boleh nampak lah yang macam sometimes family tu dia bukanlah more poor, but the keadaan di country tu memang tidak it's just not good lah for them to, dia macam susah untuk orang keluar from the poverty cycle. So how can like certain families escape the poverty trap? So this can be achieved with external intervention. For example, ada government policies, macam maybe ada macam ada scholarship or
Dan
not
you
just
all lah
government.
sekarang ni kan?
Yeah, teacher.
Is that right? Yeah. Tapi you all bukan B40 kan?
Yeah, teacher. Okay,
Okay.
macam itulah.
That's true. They you know, when you are in the deep troubles in terms of financial, we need helping hands who pull you up. So one way is by, you know, the best way to help the fishermen is give the to give fishing rods rather than to give the fish, is that right? So giving them some things, basics that they can live their life with skills and knowledge, whatever, is a better way. So that's why education is the most important thing that, you know, people need. Next to education will be education. Next to education, apa lagi?
Kalau macam chance for employment, sebab if they get education tapi macam susah untuk employed,
Job
macam,
opportunities, yeah.
Yeah.
Apa lagi ke?
Apa lagi?
Yeah, right. Satu lagi healthcare sebenarnya means that, you know, kalau you know, talking about treatment semua tu tak ada, healthcare limited, so kalau sakit pun lagi lambat baik. And job opportunity, yes, it's true. Okay, I think we need to end our session, is it right? Okay, the next session is mentor mentee
Yes,
ke lepas
teacher.
ni? Okay.
Yes, teacher.